Joining me now, Guy Benson, Townhall.com political editor and a Fox Business contributor. Guy, what do you make of this poll, and does it move the needle toward Republicans as we get closer to the midterms?
Well, Dagan, I think the competence problem for Biden really took hold last summer with the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, where he made all sorts of assurances about how that was going to be executed. Many Americans supported the underlying policy, and we all watched this humiliating, outrageous, lethal fiasco play out before our eyes, and Biden has never recovered on that metric, on that front, and he shouldn't have, because if you look at issue after issue, it's hard to pick one where this administration has exhibited consistent competence, especially on the close-to-home pocketbook issues and various crises that Americans are watching play out here in this country every single day. The only surprise about that outcome is that the numbers weren't more crooked, more upside down for this administration, given their performance.
And on that note, there's a report that was in Punchbowl News that Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, has told fellow senators early this week that the House is going to lose its Democrat majority in the midterms. I will note that in this new Fox News poll, it does show that the balance, people in favor of Democrats for Congress, has ticked up a little bit. It was kind of even in the last poll. I think it was 41-41, but it's picked up a little bit in favor of Democrats, I believe to 44%. But is that surprising? Because certainly during the summer, it seemed to be the folk that Democrats were taking advantage of the abortion issue and the fact they didn't have to talk about anything else but President Trump's raid on Mar-a-Lago. But now with this inflation report this week and that manure picnic that Biden threw at the White House, that people are certainly more focused back on what's happening with inflation and the stock market.
Yeah, that tone-deaf split screen was remarkable. I know it was just one news cycle, but I think it spoke volumes. It's the type of thing that might stick in the minds of voters, where they're getting hammered on inflation every single day, and the White House is celebrating inflation reduction the very day that this horrible report came out showing a lot of these issues actually getting worse. Core inflation up, groceries up almost 14%. It was extremely foolish optics from the White House. It is the number one issue in America. Look, the polling, it's roughly, if you look at the average, the generic ballot is tied. We'll see where this thing moves over the next 5 weeks or so. But even if Democrats have a small lead or it's a tied generic ballot going into November, typically that foretells very good news for Republicans. I would just point out quickly, Dagan, that last October, so October a year ago, the Democrats were up 4 points on the generic ballot on average across the country. What happened in November of last year in Virginia and New Jersey? An 11 to 12 point swing in the other direction. So I'm keeping my powder dry, I think, on some of the polling numbers. And I think Chuck Schumer's news flash to fellow senators is something that a lot of people have been expecting for quite some time.
Yeah, Carol Markowitz said yesterday about Randy Weingarten, who made an appearance with on the campaign trail in Virginia right before the election, like, have at it, Democrats, if you want, because Randy Weingarten was there at the White House for the inflation celebration. Let them bring her out on the campaign trail whenever they see fit. On this note, Wisconsin, speaking of campaigning, the Democrat Senate candidate Mandela Barnes shared his method to combating climate change back in 2019 at a UN conference. Listen to this guy.
The reason why we're in this mess is pursuit of greed. Like, it's capitalism run amok. That's why we're in this predicament now. It's the same reason why gun violence is so rampant in the United States of America. It's the same reason why we deal with all these other issues. So the simple answer is get money out of politics. Second answer is stymie capitalism the way it is in in America. And the third is to organize.
I could talk about that little nugget of wisdom for about 3 hours, but what do you say about that? Again, you got to go back sometimes to figure out who these candidates really are.
Stymie capitalism. He also said we got to get money out of politics. Very rich. Coming from now the Democrats, which is the party. They are the party of big money in politics. They've been outraising and outspending Republicans by a large margin in many of these races, including, I believe, his own race. So they talk a game on that. They believe something very different. But Barnes is a radical. He is not just a sort of liberal rubber stamp Biden Democrat, which would be bad enough from my perspective. He is way out there on the left on BLM stuff, on defund the police. He really fomented in some ways with his reckless words the riots that destroyed Kenosha, Wisconsin, blaming the police in a slanderous comment that he made as lieutenant governor. This is a very important race. Ron Johnson, the Republican, is the incumbent. And Wisconsinites, I think, are going to be hearing a lot of Mandela Barnes' own words over the next couple of weeks, as they should, because this person is not a mainstream Democrat from a purple state.
Oh, and I forgot the name of Terry McAuliffe. Easy to forget, but that's who Randy Weingarten was rubbing up against at the very end of the gubernatorial race in
Virginia.
Virginia.
We have Governor Youngkin.
Yes,
right?
and now it's, yes, and Winsome Sears and Jason Miera's incredibly diverse lineup of Republican leaders in my home state and where you live now too, Guy, right?
Big upgrade. And I mean, it was a juxtaposition looking back to last year. And by the way, I think education needs to remain front and center for Republicans this year. It wasn't a one-time thing with Youngkin, but he was out with a huge crowd the night before the election in Loudoun County. I was there just to observe. And Terry McAuliffe was campaigning basically in Washington, D.C. in front of a few dozen people with Randy Weingarten. I think Republicans should get a private jet just to fly her to any Democratic campaign she wants to go to for the next 2 months. I think Republicans should subsidize that. She would be a real asset.
Yes. Guy Benson, great to see you, my friend, so much.
Good to see you.
Guy.